in Lovey's defense, the keys to the defense were the 3 technique and the will linebacker, because that's what they had in Warren, Sapp, and Brooks in Tampa Bay. So he had to have those guys. Well, we didn't have, if you remember the defensive line that we had with Dick and Greg Blosch was the defensive coordinator, we had these big monsters.
Yep.
3 out of the 4 guys were Alex Brown was the small guy at about 250, 255, but the other guys were, 350, 375, and 310, between Taylor, Washington, and Daniels. Mm-hmm. We had to totally change the defensive line, and that's the year we took Tommy Harris, but he also said, he had to have a will linebacker. So in my office, there was, the cards for each of the players, and they had their height, weight, and speed. So Lovey comes in, and Lovey didn't know Lance. So he looks at his speed, and he goes, he can't play. Why not? And he had, had a very strong rookie year. Look at the speed. So Lovey, he plays 4.55. He timed 4.78 or 4.77 at the combine. So Lovey, don't worry about it. He plays in the 4.5. He's got great instincts. And that, he goes, okay, I'll trust you. We'll see what happens. And obviously, history is history. Lance was a great linebacker in that scheme, and part of it was his instincts. As good as an instinctive player as I've ever been around.
The following program is for mature audiences only. Football talk shows, most of them sound like this. Blah, 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 blah. Not this one. That's because it features the former director of college scouting with the Chicago Bears. He worked on the staff that drafted, the likes of Devin Hester, Olin Kreutz, Lance Briggs. He's the man who takes shit from absolutely nobody. He's Greg Gabriel. Gabriel joins longtime Chicago sports reporter David Schuster. And this is, accordingly, Gabriel Schuster Talk Bears.
And welcome into the Gabriel Schuster podcast, video style, as today we preview the Bears' upcoming game against the Rams in Los Angeles. It's coming up on Monday night. God, I wish I was out there for that game, as opposed to being here in Chicago with the rotten weather. But the Bears go into Monday night's game, Greg, leading the NFC North with a 5-1 record. Meanwhile, the Rams, they'll be checking in with a 4-2 record, currently tied for second with Arizona behind Seattle in the NFC West. And Greg, the Bears are a 6.5-point favorite, but as far as I'm concerned, this game's up for grabs.
I think so. And part of it, you got to go back to 2 years ago. And these two teams met in November, late November, might have been early December. Rams had a great team at that time. The Bears were moving along strongly, but there was doubters. Nobody thought they were going to be as good as they were going to be. It was a Sunday night game, I believe, and what happened was the Bears kicked the Rams' ass. And part of the key to that was the Bears basically took Aaron Donald out of the game, with their blocking scheme that night. Now, it'll be interesting to see if they try to do the same things with Donald this week. But as we all know, the offensive line has not played up to snuff yet. And it's going to be a big question mark going into the game.
A lot of conversation about Aaron Donald, as well it should be, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But Jared Goff, who came into the league pretty heralded from his college days, and I think the Bears have played him, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of times already, including that Sunday night game. And I think they've intercepted him 5 times in the 2 meetings that they've faced against him. But, he's had a pretty good season overall so far, Greg. I mean, if you slow him down or you stop him, I think you basically beat the Rams. But so far, he's 128 out of 190 passes. That's 67%, 1,570 yards. He's got 10 touchdowns. He's got 4 interceptions. He's got a QB rating of a 101.4, and he's been sacked 7 times. But again, for whatever reason, I think the Bears have had his number so far.
Yeah, the Bears have been able to play well against Jared Goff, but look, you got to be careful of Goff. Goff He's getting more experienced. He's been in the system now for a number of years. He's a quality player. He comes up big. A lot of people looked at that Rams game last week against San Francisco, up in San Francisco, and they didn't play very well, probably played the worst game of the season. And they're saying, oh, the Rams aren't that good. Well, hey, you know what? I've said this a number of times on this show. What they did last week, what they did in another game means diddly squat. It's what they do in this game. They prepare differently. The game plans differently. And that's going to be, how the Bears react to Goff and their defensive game plan to stop the Rams offense. And the Rams got some playmakers. Darrell Henderson's a hell of a running back. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, very, very good receivers. Tyler Higbee's a good move tight end. They're loaded with playmakers on that offense, and the Bears defense, which has played great so far, but they've been, they let people go from the 20 to the 20, but they don't let them in the end zone. I think we got to cut them off at the 50 this time.
This will be a good test, obviously, for the Bears defense. I think this is probably the best offense they have faced going into a game. Rushing, they do rush the ball. They have 811 yards overall compared to the Bears' 540 yards. So they've been more successful on the ground moving the ball. You mentioned Henderson. He's got only 348 yards, Greg, but he does average 4.8 a carry. That's pretty damn good. You mentioned the receivers. Cooper Kupp has got 31 receptions. Robert Woods, 27. Tyler Higbee, the tight end, has only got 18 receptions, but he's had some big ones. They don't seem to throw that ball very much to their running backs. That's what I've noticed so far in their stats so far.
No, they got the two running backs, Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown's got actually 12 receptions, but for only 62 yards, a 5-yard average. Darrell Henderson, 7 for 96 yards. He's averaging 13 yards a reception, and he's an explosive player. I really liked him coming out of Memphis. I thought he might have been the best back in that draft or second best back in that draft. He was a guy that I was hoping the Bears could get last year, but he went in the second round, and the Bears didn't get around to drafting Montgomery till the third.
And you mentioned their defense. Obviously, it starts in the middle and it ends with Aaron Donald. I'm going to ask you right now. So far, Donald's got 7.5 sacks. He's got the team's got 20, and he's got 7.5 of those 20. I don't remember. Help me out, because I'm sure you did your homework on him. What was Aaron Donald's grade coming out of college? Was he as heralded as he's turned out to be so far in the NFL?
Well, if he was as heralded as he turned out to be, then he wouldn't have gone 12th to the Rams.
Right.
And actually, let's go back some stories about that draft. That's a guy, Phil Emery was the general manager for the Bears, and they ended up drafting Kyle Fuller in that draft. But one of the guys they were targeting was Aaron Donald. And I was doing the draft night broadcast for the Score that night, and it's getting up, and I think it's like the 11th pick, and the Rams are on the clock, and I didn't think the Rams were going to take Donald, and I sent a text to his agent, and I said, looks like he's going to get to the Bears. He said, nope, Rams just took him. So I mean, that's how close it got to Aaron Donald becoming a Bear. They ended up going with Kyle Fuller, and Kyle Fuller's one of the best corners in the game. So really nothing gained, nothing lost. But Aaron Donald, one of the top interior defensive linemen in the game, not the biggest guy. He's only 6'1", probably weighs 285, 290 pounds, but so fast, strong, and explosive, and just got amazing competitiveness.
Right, you are. He's listed at 6'1", 280 pounds. He's obviously strong. I mean, anybody who's on the defensive line or offensive line, they're all strong, but it's his burst of speed. It seems like that very first step, he's much quicker than getting around the offensive lineman. And I imagine teams have got to try and double team him to keep him off the quarterback. I'm sure that's not only the Bears' MO, but almost every team's MO.
Well, yeah, but and let's go back to that game 2 years ago when the Bears offense went out, and the whole game plan was stop Aaron Donald. They did a great job. He may have had one tackle in that game, but basically throughout the game he was a non-factor. They were able to run the ball. They were able to throw the ball fairly well in that game. Won the game handily. I don't have the score in front of me, but it was a game that the Bears won going away. Wasn't that it was a close game at all. So, But this game's in LA. That game was a night game in Chicago, late in the season, a little bit colder. It'll be a different story out in LA. Even though it's an indoor game, it's still a different situation.
Greg, we talk every week that maybe this is the week that the Bears offense explodes, and maybe one of these weeks it actually happens, and maybe it'll be this coming Monday night. But I think they have a chance to, even though Donald is great, I take a look at the Rams defense. They're not a defense that turns the ball over. They only have 4 interceptions, 2 by Darius Williams in the secondary, and they've only recovered 2 fumbles. So it's not exactly like they're a Lovie Smith, kind of defense that turns the ball over, and they do give up yards. So, I mean, again, who knows? Week to week, as you always say, you don't know what's going to happen, but this is a week where the Bears actually, with the weather conditions being conducive also, might be able to move the ball down the field.
Yeah, we thought that last week, and I'm going to say the same thing I said, last week and said after the game going in. Teams right now are going into the game. The Bears' opponent are going in with the idea their whole game plan is to stop the run and make the Bears throw the football. If you're going to beat them, but they got to beat them with the pass. Well, I'm sure the Rams are going to do the same thing. They're going to go win, stop the run first, make them pass. And, I personally think the passing game is what people complain about the running game, but I think it's the passing game that's got to get going early. The passing game will open up the running game. Usually it's the opposite. I just think that's the case with the Bears this year.
All right, we're going to talk about the Bears passing game and the overall offense, and in fact, the whole team in just a minute. But I just want to touch on one more aspect of the Rams. And actually, the Bears had an effect because they lost a player from their practice squad this week who, the Rams will probably ultimately take a look at. And I'm talking about the kicking game for the Rams. We're going to go into the game, I'm sure, with Samuel Sloman, who's only 7 of 9 field goals so far this season. And even worse than that, he's 15 of 18. That means he's missed 3 extra points already, including one last week against San Francisco. I always say this, Greg, if not 1 or 2 games each season comes down to a kicker, maybe it's this one, and they don't have a very good kicker right now.
Right. He's been inconsistent, and obviously they're not happy, and that's why they went out and signed Forbath off the Bears practice squad. Don't be shocked if you see Forbath activated for this game.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the Bears now. Nick Foles, and I want to talk a lot about Nick Foles here because there's an interesting rating system that I want to talk about in just a couple of seconds here. But Nick Foles comes into the game. He's 95 of 152. That's 63%, 878 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a QB rating of 80.4. So maybe we'll start there right now. Right now, he's listed overall in the NFL, and everybody's got their own rating systems, and I'm sure they're comparable. And the one that I just looked at a couple of moments ago, he's rated number 27 out of 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. The only guys underneath him in this rating system are going further down the totem pole: Carson Wentz, Andy Dalton, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Joe Flacco. Flacco, by the way, has won a Super Bowl, and so has Nick Foles for what it's worth. What kind of credence do you put into these QB rating systems at any point of any season?
I mean, they're valid. That's why they're there. But at the same time, there's little things that can change that rating system a lot. One is he had a costly interception last week, didn't throw for a lot of yards. And so those 2 things bring down the overall rating. And in a game basis, the important thing is that he's winning games. And he's come from behind to win games. So, except for last week. Last week, they got the lead early and they held on to the lead. But the other games, he's had to come from behind. But he's had some costly interceptions. You'll see because he hasn't played a lot. He's only played, 3 games. So the number of throws he has is down compared to some of the other guys. He goes into a game and he doesn't throw a pick and he throws a couple touchdown passes, that rating will go way up.
It's interesting. The reporters, when they had their Zoom session with Foles earlier this week, one of the questions they asked of him is, you seemingly already with the Bears, and maybe it's during your whole career, you get hot and cold during a game, both of them. And that's exactly what we've seen out of him so far in a Bears. I think last week at one point he was 11 of 12 in the first half. Then he was 3 of 9 after that. And then he got hot again after that. So is that sort of an oddity, or does that happen with more quarterbacks than we actually realize?
I haven't really thought about it, David, in all honesty. So and I'd have to go back and, you got to look at the individual throws of the other quarterbacks and see where they are as far as numbers of completions that are made in a row, that type of thing. It is what it is. The bottom line, again, is winning, and he's winning.
Yeah, it's the old Al Davis. But matter of fact, why don't we hear from Nick Foles? Because again, he talked to the reporters earlier this week, and I always think of Al Davis when I think of winning. Just win, baby, and that's exactly what Foles said to the media earlier this week.
As we're finding ways to win. If you look at our team, two of the games we won, and one of the games I didn't play in, but one I did, we had a 99 point something chance of losing that game at one point in the fourth quarter. That doesn't happen where you come back from that ever, twice. And there's been other times where we've come back. I think in the Thursday night game, we came back. So I get it. I know y'all heard me say the prettiness and all that. I'd rather win ugly than lose pretty. Obviously, we want to get a better rhythm and do things better. But the ultimate thing in this league is you want to find out how to win games as a team. And we're continuing to work towards those goals of getting better on the offensive side of the ball as well as the defensive side of the ball and special teams. We're never stopping. But this is just a process. This is a part of the game. And I think it goes back to not losing belief that you will get better if you do the little things right daily.
It's really interesting. Foles went on to say a lot of other things in his Zoom session with the media earlier this week, Greg. And one of the things that he said that it makes a lot of sense, and you've picked up on this a bunch of times also, where he says, even though I'm used to playing in this offense, I've played it in a couple of other places, the same system, I'm still getting used to the personnel. I'm still getting used to the whole environment, yada, yada, yada. And so week to week, and especially during the training camp when they didn't really have that much of a training camp and they didn't hit anybody on top of it for the most part, he still feels like a young quarterback, even though he's used to the system.
Right. He knows the terminology. That's how you're used to the system. But you've got to get used to the way the play caller calls the plays, and you've got to get a relationship with your different offensive players, as who you're throwing the ball to. And that's all timing. And that comes with practice and reps. And I think we're going to see him and the offense do better as time goes on, as he gets more time, playing with these guys. Don't forget, this is going to be the fourth game he's played in with the Bears, the third game he's starting. I'd look for there to be, improvement each week. We've seen that. We just want to see it. Last week we went and said they got to score in the first quarter. Well, they did, and the turnover helped in that. And then they hadn't scored in the third quarter. Well, they did. It was only a field goal, but they also stopped themselves a little bit in the third quarter when they had some good drives going. It's that consistency that has to happen. And I think, like I said, we're seeing bits and pieces of it each week. It's just got to happen more often.
All right, some of the other numbers we made mention of the numbers offensively by the Rams, but let's do it for the Bears as well. The Bears have overall, as I mentioned earlier, 540 yards of rushing so far this season. That's about 90 yards a game, but over the last three games, I think they've had about 120 yards in those three games. So obviously the offensive line and the rushing attack overall has not been up to snuff, if you will, the last three games. What do you see in those last three games? Why haven't they been able to move the ball on the ground? And two of those were against very good defenses. Obviously, you got to take that into account as well.
I said it earlier, David. I think it's because the defenses, the opponents, are going into the game saying, we got to stop the run first. Make the Bears throw the ball. And so they're concentrating on the run. They're doing a good job doing that. It's obvious the Bears want to try to run the ball. They haven't been successful at it. But because the running game isn't that good, you're getting off schedule. Instead of being in a 2nd and 6, you're in a 2nd and 8 or 9, or even a 2nd and 10. You've got to be what I think they ought to do is actually, instead of trying to run on first down, is actually throw the ball a little bit more on first down. Even some of those little plays are going to pick up 4, 5, 6 yards. That gets you on schedule, and that alone can help the run game, especially when you get to second down.
Speaking of throwing the football, Allen Robinson leads the team in receptions, 40 so far. One of the stats, team stats, Greg, that sticks out for me is that 14 different players on the Bears have caught a pass, and of course includes Massey, one of those, sort of by mistake. But 14 different guys have caught passes so far for the Bears this season. That's an impressive stat to me. Defensively, Roquan Smith, I think so far he's having an all-pro season. What do you think? He leads the team tackles at 52.
You know, I think early on in the year, he's always been in the right place. From an assignment standpoint, he's playing great. In the earlier games, he was missing a lot of tackles. There's plays that could have been made behind the line of scrimmage by him where tackles got broken. And even though his numbers say he's getting a lot of tackles, he had missed tackles in those games. It was better last week, better in the second half, against Tampa Bay 2 weeks ago. I think we got to see him play and the defense play the way they have the last game and a half.
Well, I said going into the season, because there was no preseason, I said tackling would be probably, one of the deficits for all teams, much less the Bears, in the first 2 or 3 games. And I think that's to your point, what you just said. But I think he's been really good. And when I say all pro, maybe I'm giving a little bit too much praise. But I'll tell you what, one of the Kyle Fuller's having an all pro season. I can say that. And I saw, again, rankings. Even though Jalen Johnson has been picked on a lot, he's also been in the right position more often than not. And one of the ranking systems of defensive secondaries, meaning cornerback tandems, I think the Bears tandem right now of Fuller and Johnson is like right up near the top of the league right now.
Jalen Johnson's having a hell of a year, but nobody's throwing the ball on Kyle Fuller. So they got to go somewhere with it, and they're going to Johnson. He's a rookie, figuring he's going to make mistakes. He's made some mistakes. He's had some busted coverages, given up some big plays, but at the same time, he's got that short memory. It doesn't affect him for the rest of the game. He comes back and he plays strong and he makes other plays. There's been because he's a rookie, he's not getting the benefit of the doubt on some of these calls. He had the interference call last week called on him. I think if he's a veteran cornerback, that doesn't happen. As he is in the league a little bit longer, you're going to see those go away.
Khalil Mack leads the Bears in sacks 4.5 so far through the first 6 games. Chuck Pagano, during one of the conference calls about a week and a half ago, said that last year he was playing all beat up. I mean, most players are beat up, but he said Mack was really beat up, and his output was a lot down from the previous year. He was double and triple team. But do you see a difference in Khalil Mack this season as opposed to last season?
Yeah, because he's finishing better, and I think that's the difference, is that he's feeling better, and that allows him that extra half step or extra step to finish the play and get to it. He's still getting held like I've never seen a player get held in my life. I mean, just about every play. It's like he's in a rodeo and he's getting wrestled down, and that should allow the Bears to get more calls than they are, but the league as a whole is really down on the holding calls. They've kept them to a minimum. So unless it's completely obvious, they're just not throwing the flag in those situations. We still got to get a little more production on the other side from the pass rush. Now, Quinn's picked up his play. He was injured, actually missed most of the preseason as far as training camp. He's picked up his play the last couple weeks, but there's an unsung player, an unknown player, James Vaughters, and he was our number 1 pick in the XFL draft last year as a defensive player, and he has actually had, I think, 1.5 sacks this year, playing as a reserve and playing pretty good football and getting some right. He plays in a rotation, and they're playing basically 3 guys on that one side. Max on the one side, and then Vaughters, Mingo, and Quinn are on the other side. And they're all making contributions. We just got to see a little bit more consistency on that side, so you can't concentrate on stopping Khalil Mack.
And you beat me to the punch on Quinn, because I think he has played better, maybe because he is healthier. He was on the injury report for the first few games and missed a lot of practice. So maybe health has everything to do with his increased output. And Danny Trevathan, I think you motivated him, Greg. I don't think there's any question.
I don't think it was me. But
well, somehow,
he's playing better.
he's, and he's second on the team in tackling, and he should be, because he's always should be, around the ball, the middle of the field, where he plays. But he definitely has gotten better the last couple of weeks.
Yes. The only thing, if I got to complain about the Bears defense, and that, believe me, there's very few, if any, is that there's situations where the inside linebackers, be it Roquan or Danny Trevathan, are put into situations where they got to cover a slot receiver. It could be a running back. It could be a regular receiver in a man-on-man situation. In some of the different defenses that are called, they aren't going to win that battle. It's not going to happen. And especially with Danny Trevathan, he just doesn't have the speed or explosiveness. Now, Roquan is faster. He was a guy that timed in the mid 4.5s when he came out. But still, you get in the league, the longer you stay in the league, you don't stay at that speed. You play fast because of your football intelligence, not necessarily your physical speed.
All right, final thing on the Bears, special teams. Their special teams last week was excellent, in every phase possible. They didn't get much in kick returns because I don't think Patterson even had a chance to return a kick last week, but everything else was picture perfect. Speaking of kicking, though, the NFC Special Teams Player of the Week was Caro Santos, 10 of 12 so far on field goals. He's perfect on extra points, 12 of 12. I don't know. He has another week or two like he just did last week. I think this job is his going forward, period.
Well, that part remains to be seen, because Eddie Piñeiro's, still on the squad. They got him on IR. They liked him off of what he did last year. But, hey, Santos, he missed a couple kicks early in the year. One of them was a relatively short kick. But since then, he's been perfect. He had a 55-yarder last week. When you're on a hot streak like that, you got to go with them.
All right. Again, one of the reasons why the Bears were so successful against the Rams in that game a couple of years ago on that Sunday night game is because they were able to neutralize Aaron Donald. If you're able to do that, boy, I'll tell you what, that's more than 50% of the game plan. Matt Nagy would not talk about the game plan and how to stop Aaron Donald, but he certainly was very he had a lot of praise. I'll just leave it at that for Aaron Donald. Here's the coach.
Every time you put on the tape, you can see where he's at, and your eyes go right to him, and you know he's a heck of a player. The burst that he has off the line of scrimmage at the snap, it could be a simple run play, and he just anticipates before you snap the ball, and he shoots the A or B gap, and next thing you know, he's taking the handoff. That's natural for him. When he gets one-on-one and he goes ahead and has a certain move that he uses, the technique he uses, he's so strong and so compact that it's like a spring. He just shoots out of there. And then even when you think you have him on the edge and you got 5-yard distance running away from him outside the hash, next thing you know, he jumps out like Superman. He's just like sprawling and like trying to tackle you from behind. He's all over the place. He's completely obsessed with just playing really hard when he's out there. He doesn't care how many people are on him. And you got to know, I mean, if you think that they don't think that we're going to have to know where he's at, we're foolish. We all know we got to know at all times where he's at. It's just how we're going to do it and how we get to it.
The Rams have had so many good defensive tackles over the years. I mean, I go back to my childhood, Merlin Olsen, and they had Deacon Jones, of course, back in those days. They've always had good defensive lines, seemingly.
They have, and that happens. It's Bears have good linebackers.
Right.
It seems like year after year after year. Why? I can't answer that. It's just the way it works out. But I've been here for 19 years now, and the Bears have always been strong in the middle for that entire 19 years, and going well before that, they were strong in the middle. So Rams have a good way or a strong way of finding quality defensive linemen.
A lot of that is coaching, of course, as you well know as well. Speaking of Donald, he did an interview with ESPN earlier this week. Came across really humble. I mean, he doesn't seem to care that much about his own personal stats or anything along those lines. I mean, he just cares about winning and improving as a player each and every week. But one of the reporters asked him in this interview, or sort of reminded him, that he's played against Nick Foles not once, not twice, but 3 times, and has yet to sack him.
I don't know. I just ain't get to him yet. I got to find a way, though. But, I'm going to go out there and play. I'm gonna study, and, hopefully I get them opportunities and I get to them this time. So we're going to see. Thanks for the motivation, too, by the way.
There you go.
Thanks for the motivation.
Yeah, he probably didn't even realize it. Then the press over. Now he's going to be geared up.
Probably not. Oh, by the way, Foles, when he did his Zoom session with the media, I guess he was asked about Tom Brady snubbing him.
I saw that.
I got a big kick out of that, and I guess Brady was asked even more so in his Zoom session with the Tampa Bay media. And I don't know what Brady's retort was to their media, but Foles basically laughed it off once again and said, "You know what? We've never talked about it. At some point, we'll probably have a good laugh or have a conversation over a beer." But you know what? Foles has gone against him twice, including the big game in the Super Bowl, and he's undefeated against Brady for what it's worth.
Yeah, and then Brady's comment, you go back, he said, well, when you got a relationship with some of the quarterbacks that we play, and he mentioned 3, including Justin Herbert, the rookie quarterback for the Chargers. Now, how the hell does he have a relationship with Justin Herbert besides he doesn't? It was just what he thought. That he thought at the time, and he quickly had to come up with an answer that came into his mind real quick, so he mentioned his name.
The whole thing is pretty comical for whatever reason.
It's bullshit. Come on, let's play football. Who cares?
Speaking of quarterbacks, I got to ask you about this as we go around the league now. Miami, Ryan Fitzpatrick wasn't playing poor by any stretch.
He's playing great.
He had 10 touchdowns so far in the 6 games that he played and 7 interceptions. Not mobile at all, obviously, and he was sacked 7 times. But Miami has decided to go, and I'm going to butcher this kid's name. I always do. Tua Tagovailoa,
something like that.
Thank you. That's why you're my mentor here. Why did they make this change here? Why do you think?
Because they drafted him in the first round with a high pick, and you got to get him in the game. He's the future of the franchise, not Fitz. Is it fair to Fitz? Hell no. Are there veterans on that team that? And here's the thing. Who thought Miami was going to be good? And Miami's won 3 games. So, looking at it from that aspect, and there's going to be some veterans that are wondering, well, why are you making a switch? We got a chance to win with this guy. The other guy's a rookie. Well, the powers that be are also thinking about the future of the franchise, and the future of the franchise is a first-round pick. They got to find out if he can play. Did they make the right selection? Or is she going to be a mistake? And you want to find that out sooner rather than later.
All right. Speaking of quarterbacks, speaking of high draft picks, obviously the kid from Clemson is going to be probably at this juncture the number 1 pick. And it seems like already a lot of teams are angling to get to him. And what I mean by that is it seems like a lot of teams have decided to fold their tents even already this season. And it sure seems like the Minnesota Vikings, and I picked up on one of your tweets a couple of days ago. That was
yesterday.
Yeah, it seems like the Vikings are headed in that direction.
Yeah, the whole trade thing with Ngakoue was surprising. When they first made the trade, you weren't as surprised as the news that came out maybe an hour later, and that's Danielle Hunter is out for the season. So now he's got to have surgery because of a herniated disc in his neck. So now you've got your 2 pass rushers gone for the rest of the season. What are they going to do on defense? It's kind of crazy. And then when they traded Ngakoue, they got back less than what they paid just 2 months ago, a month and a half ago.
Well, they gave up 40 points at home to Atlanta, a team that was winless going into the game last Sunday, with their defense more intact. Now that it's getting shredded, either by injuries or by trade with Ngakoue, going over to Baltimore. My God, teams are just going to beat the crap out of this team going forward, aren't they?
Well, yeah, especially not now. You got nobody to rush the passer. That's going to give their interior defensive line has a chance to be pretty good, but with no pass rush coming off the edge, that's got to give your opponents a big advantage going into any game.
All right. You always have your finger on the pulse. What's the latest in New York? Obviously the Giants lost last night's game to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is leading the East, I think, right now with a record of what? What are they, 3-4?
No, they won 2 games.
They won 2 games.
Yesterday was their second. I told you a while ago, you're going to have a losing record in the NFC East, and they're going to have a home game in the playoffs.
It's unbelievable.
It's ridiculous.
All right, but the Giants, they still have their 1 win. The Jets are still winless. Adam Gase, I don't know how he still has a job. I think if the Jets lose this week, and I'm taking a look here real quickly, who are they playing against? They're going to lose against Buffalo, so they're going to be 0-7 after this Sunday's game. Is that going to be it for Adam Gase? I mean, how is he still even?
I thought it was going to be it a couple of weeks ago, but here's one of the problems. Who do they replace him with?
I don't know.
Now, but on paper, you've got an excellent guy in Greg Williams. He's been a head coach. He could run the team very satisfactorily, for the rest of the season. But he's one of the problems because you got a disconnect between, within the coaching staff. And, basically Greg Williams in a press conference last week threw the offense under the bus, which means he was throwing his boss, the head coach, under the bus because he runs the offense. And Gase then commented that he wasn't too happy about the comment. So how do you go and fire Adam Gase and make Williams the interim coach when he is part of the dysfunction of the whole organization?
Well, you know how it works. Whoever has the ear of the general manager, whoever makes that decision, and you know how it is in front offices. I'm not saying you did it or that you were even part of anything like that, but you know how there's backbiting in all jobs, much less coaching staffs in the NFL.
It doesn't always get public. And this one got public. And here's another thing, too, when you look at it as a potential guy to elevate to the interim coach for the rest of the year. The other name would be another defensive coach, Joe Vitt. Joe Vitt is Adam Gase's father-in-law. So, you got some problems there. So it might be that they're just going to ride out the season. Who knows? I mean, does the guy deserve to get fired? Yes, he does. The team was playing terrible. Gase is a head coach in Miami, failed. They got rid of him after a couple of years. And how he ended up with that job in New York is beyond me. But Joe Douglas is not the guy that hired him. In fact, it was actually Gase that helped bring in Joe Douglas. And Joe's a very quality general manager. But he's been given a bad deck of cards when he first got there. He's got to try to clean that whole mess up.
All right, let's go around the NFL. As always, there's some really interesting games, and there's some really dog games this week also, by the way. But let's start in the division. And speaking of dog games, Detroit 2-4. They're on the road against Atlanta. Atlanta got its first win under its new head coach, so they're undefeated in that aspect. But they're 1-5 overall. I got Atlanta winning this game at home.
Yeah, let's go with Atlanta. We'll see what happens. I don't have a lot to say about that one.
Okay. How about this next one? Green Bay, who, by the way, are looking up at the Bears. Green Bay 4-1 on the road at Houston. Also, Houston finally got its one win under their new head coach. They're 1-5. I think this will be a shootout. And let's face it, Aaron Rodgers had a dog-ass game last week. I think he rebounds. I think this is a high-scoring game, and I think probably Green Bay prevails.
I'm going to go against you. I'm going to go with Houston because I think Green Bay was terrible. They weren't bad. They were terrible. They were. They got exposed a little bit last week in that game, and they got physically beaten up. And so, Houston's playing at home. Houston's been playing good football, since they made the change, since they got rid of O'Brien and made Romeo the head coach. They had a chance to beat the Titans last week. I don't think it's a given that Green Bay is going to beat them. Definitely will be a high-scoring game. Don't you agree with that? Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting they say that they got beat up because I remember so many times over the years where the opponents who played the Bears the following week would lose when it came to stats because the Bears, monsters of the Midway, would beat the hell out of whoever they were playing, and then the following week they were so beat up that they would lose the game. Did you find that to be true over the years yourself?
In all honesty, I've never really looked at that stat closely to see. I look at things like, if you're playing on Monday night and then you got to go on the road the next week, that's a big disadvantage when you have the short week because you got to travel. So it takes away. If you're at home, it's a different story. But when you're playing on a Monday night game and got to go on the road the following week, I think that's really tough to do. Okay,
Battle of Ohio. I don't know, for whatever reason, I think this might be an interesting game. Cleveland 4-2 at Cincinnati 1-4. The Bengals, they've been competitive, and Burrow's had his moments here and there. He's also gotten the hell beat out of him a couple of times too. So I don't know. I think this will be another high-scoring game as far as as long as the weather is conducive. I don't know who wins this game. Who do you got?
I got Cleveland. That's always a big game for Cincinnati because of the ownership in Cincinnati, which is the Brown family, which started off with the Browns. So that's a game they always want to win, but I just don't think that they have the personnel to match up against the Cleveland Browns.
Okay, I think the game of the day is this next one, and I'm surprised they didn't flex this one into the nighttime. Pittsburgh 5-0, Tennessee 5-0.
That's going to be a hell of a football game. Where's it at?
It's at Tennessee.
At Tennessee? Wow. Tennessee looked great against Buffalo, but then had a short week and struggled against the Texans. Now they got a full week to prepare. They're playing at home. Teams don't win forever. I think Pittsburgh.
Well, Roethlisberger, I don't know. He found the fountain of youth somehow, some way. He's, when we talked about those quarterback ratings before, by the way, I should tell you who the top 6 quarterback, according to those ratings, Russell Wilson, who's having an all-pro season, number 1. Mahomes, right behind him, number 2. Aaron Rodgers, in spite of that dog last week, is number 3. Roethlisberger is number 4. Kyler Murray out in Arizona, number 5, with a bullet going up. And then your buddy Josh Allen, one of your favorites, he's at number 6 right now.
Yeah, but Josh Allen has struggled. The Bills have struggled. I'm not going to put it all on Josh Allen. The Bills' defense has struggled the last couple weeks, and the in the game Monday night. Now, I'll tell you one thing about Buffalo. They're because of COVID and nothing that they've done. It's their opponents what they have done. They've had their schedule turned around where they, now that they played 2 games on short weeks. Now this will be the 3rd week in a row, and that's tough for a team. But Buffalo will beat the Jets. It's like you just got to show up to beat the Jets.
It's interesting because I'm picking up another one of your tweets. You said in that game against Kansas City that Mahomes was having an easier, not an easy time, but an easier time in the elements in the rain. And it was raining basically sideways in that game against Buffalo, and that Josh Allen was having a harder time. But you know what? If you're a great quarterback, you just figure it out no matter what the elements. I mean, I always think about Bart Starr playing in that Sub-Zero game up in Green Bay.
Right.
That he figured it out. So the great ones are always able to figure it out.
Yeah, and Allen got better, but he didn't get any help in that game. The defense was terrible. The Kansas City offensive line was the best offensive line play I've seen all year. They were just tremendous. That's a passing team, and they ran for over 200 yards in that game.
All right, a battle of what is this? The NFC South. Carolina 3-3, New Orleans 3-2. If nothing else, that division is very even seemingly so far. I think I got New Orleans winning at home in that game, and I have some fans for that game for the first time, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and I'll tell you, New Orleans, I think, is one of the disappointing teams in the league. It's like all of a sudden Drew Brees is showing his age, and he doesn't have that zip in his arm anymore. They got to come up here and play in a couple of weeks. Is it next week that they play here?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's hope Carolina beats the hell out of them and makes it tougher for them.
Fair enough. Buffalo at the Jets. Do we need to say anything?
No, we already talked about it.
All right. So Buffalo wins, and the Jets, of course, keep losing. Speaking of dog games, Dallas 2-4. I hope Washington and Ron Rivera win this game. Washington at 1-5. That division, as you mentioned, totally up for grabs with a losing record, going to win that division. I really hope Ron Rivera sticks it to Dallas on Sunday.
Yeah, I'd like to see that happen. I'll tell you what, though. And we had him on earlier. Mike McCartney was on as a guest earlier, and we talked about how on Twitter he always gets mistaken for Mike McCarthy. Well, there was a couple this week. One guy says, "Coach, don't you think you should stop tweeting during the game?" And because Mike's always tweeting, and Mike says, "You may have something there."
Oh, gosh.
I just can't believe that. I mean, they don't even have the same last name. Yet people mistake, scores of people on Twitter mistake Mike McCartney for Mike McCarthy.
I've always said this, Greg. Twitter is either the greatest or the worst invention of all time, and sometimes it's both almost at the same time.
I agree with you.
Tampa Bay 4-2 at Vegas 3-2. Tom Brady was better last week. By the way, Tom Brady in that list of quarterbacks He's number 12, the same number he wears on his uniform. So he's not at the top and he's not at the bottom. And speaking of quarterbacks showing their age and getting beat up, the Bears beat him up in that game, and he does show his age at times.
Yeah, and Vegas is playing pretty good football right now. They beat Kansas City 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go with Vegas in this one.
All right, that's an upset, I guess, in itself, maybe. Kansas City 5-1 on the road at Denver 2-3. This is always a spirited battle in the AFC West.
Yeah, but you got to go with even though Denver beat New England last week. New England is just not a good football team. They don't have the personnel, and Cam Newton has been brought down to earth. Especially after he tested positive for COVID and he came back. He just been very ordinary. He started off good, but you get a couple weeks of film on guys and you can see what offenses are trying to do with certain players. Teams have figured it out, and he's been very average.
I'm also amazed at Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's got such incredible talent. And you know what, Greg? He's talking about quarterbacks who find a way of win games. I mean, he does it with his talent, obviously, but I've seen a couple of passes that he throws where it's like defensive linemen are falling on him, and the only way he can throw it is almost like sidearm because he knows where like a tight end is or something like that. He's just got a knack. I mean, the kid is just really amazing, and he's also very rich already too, for what it's worth.
Yeah, but that's the baseball player in him, and he was a baseball player, and his dad was a major league baseball player.
Right.
I mean, he can make those off-angle throws like nobody else. It's like that, the Allstate commercial where he's playing the cornhole game and he's sinking every one from all different angles. Yeah, I mean that's he can do it. Very few other people can do that.
Please tell me that's trick photography. He didn't really do that in that.
Of course, it's trick photography, but I wouldn't put it past him.
All right, just a couple more games. This is an interesting game. San Francisco 3-3, New England under 500, 2-3. This is Jimmy Garoppolo coming back to New England, I think, for the first time. Do you think New England regrets giving up Garoppolo because they didn't have anything when finally Brady was gone? In retrospect, do you think there's any regret on their part?
Yeah, probably in retrospect, but you got to go with, what was going on at that time. And Tom Brady was the quarterback, and, it was time to make a move. So they moved on from Garoppolo. Do they wish they had him now? Absolutely.
I think New England wins that game.
I'll go with San Francisco. We ought to keep track of these just so we have a running record.
No, I think we shouldn't, because I know I'll look bad. Jacksonville, here's a dog game. Jacksonville 1-5 and the Chargers 1-4. Blech.
Chargers.
Okay, enough said on that one. And then the game that they flexed to Sunday night because of the whole COVID problem with the Vegas and Tampa Bay game. And this is a good game, by the way. Seattle 5-0, Arizona second in division to Seattle at 4-2. This is a good game.
I don't think Arizona's as good as some people are making them out to be. And, Dallas played them hard for a little while, and then Dallas just sucks. So they ended up giving up a bunch of big plays. I'm going to go with Seattle all day on that one.
All right, fair enough. And then the final game, of course, and we're getting back to the Bears and the Rams game on Monday night. The Rams, for what it's worth, are still, I think it dropped to 6 points now. It started at 6.5. Straight up, who do you like?
Well, I want the Bears to win. I think the Rams are going to win.
I think the Rams are going to win also. And you know what? I'm not.
And I hope I'm wrong. But I picked Tampa Bay, and so I hope it's similar to that.
Aldo, we see you snap here into the picture. There he is.
I only snapped in because I've got a few questions for Greg that we'll put into the chat room. But since you're asking, I think the Bears are going to win. You know why? Because the Rams have beaten their 4 victories are against all 4 of those NFC East teams. I think they're more pretenders than contenders. And so I just got a gut feel that the Bears are going to go to LA and smack the crap out of them.
Well, I hope you're right.
Hey, here are a few questions for Mr. Greg Gabriel. A lot of talk in the chat room of people wanting you to comment on what is wrong with this offensive line. They start off the season with 3 excellent games, and then all of a sudden over the last 3 games, they seem to have regressed. Do you have any evaluation of what's going on?
I think I've mentioned it a couple times here. And when you say the offensive line has regressed, and you're really talking about the run game, because except for Leno in what was that 2 games ago where he just, he was atrocious in pass protection a few times. And what stands out with an offensive tackle, he can have a pretty good game and you give up a bad sack and the whole world sees it. So then you get killed for that particular game. Like last week, Coward, some people say, oh, Coward played terrible. No, he didn't. Coward had one bad play where a guy came across his face, hit Montgomery, and it was down in the red zone, hit Montgomery for a 3-yard loss. But when you look at the rest of the game, he played a good football game. So, I think we know the run game's not in sync. And I think it's because the opponents are going into every game, trying to stop the Bears running game, make them throw. I think some of the play calling's got to switch in that instead of running all the time on first down, let's throw the ball more on first down. I think that will help open up the running game, and that'll make the offensive line look that much better. I think their pass protection as a whole, since Foles has taken over, it's been good. Obviously not the best in the league, but they don't have the best personnel in the league on the offensive line.
Right. I think you're right. I think there's some predictability with some of the run calls. And it's like when they're under center, you can almost 90% of the time they're running the ball. And so
I don't know about that. I don't know if I agree with you on that, because I think they're trying to play from under center a lot, even with the pass game. But when you run on first down, if it's a failed play and you come up with 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8, you're off schedule, where you can do something in the short passing game, get the ball out of your hand real quick. It's tough for the defense to cover those plays and get into a 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5 situation.
Right.
That makes the run game a little bit easier. You're going to run some on first down, but you got to mix in first down throws.
Hey, Greg, before Aldo asks you another question, let me just follow up on something he just made mention of. The offensive line, and I think not sure when the trading deadline is, but I think it's upcoming shortly.
Next week.
Okay. Normally, there's not much action in the trading deadline. I think you've sort of indicated.
It's actually 2 weeks from now. I think it's like
Tuesday,
election day, or Tuesday. Yeah. So right before election day or something.
Okay. Does Ryan Pace look to improve the offensive line in the draft? I mean, what can he do?
Bigsy wrote about it in his Q&A. First of all, there's a quality offensive lineman out there. Who wants to get rid of them? They're hard to find. So, and if there is, you got to pay through the roof for them. At the same time, I mean, the trade deadline in the NFL has always been a non-event, going back forever. You have a couple deals and that's it. Where in hockey, baseball, and basketball, they have specials going on because deals are coming off the board so quickly. That's not the case in football. This year, though, and some people have come up with this, and I respect some of the people that have made these statements, that because the anticipated of what the anticipated salary cap is going to be next year, and it's going to be lower. Now, after we had Mike McCartney on, a lot of us think that it's going to end up being flat, that they'll cut a deal, the league will cut a deal with the Players Association to have a flat cap, and it won't go down. Maybe it goes down a little bit, but not the 10, 12% like people are saying. But if people really believe that's going to be the case, then teams are going to try to get rid of salaries. And when can you do that? You can do it, part of it you can do it at the trade deadline. And so maybe there's some bargains available then. That's going to be a wait and see, because who knows who's going to be available. The Vikings got rid of a player they just traded for 7 weeks ago. The other day, that could happen again. It's a wait and see situation. I don't think we can predict it.
Right. Great segue to this next question. Steven Zimmerman was listening into the Buffon 55 show, and there was a segment where they were coming up with trade scenarios, and John Buffon offered up a trade scenario of T.Y. Hilton, the wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts, to the Bears for draft picks or so forth. And so Zim knows that you've got some connections out there in Indianapolis.
I can't see why the Colts would want to trade T.Y. Hilton.
Because he's not done anything this season.
But who do they got to replace him? They're not giving up on the season. I guarantee you that.
Is that really an area where the Bears need to upgrade that much? I mean,
I don't think so. I think they got the players. It's getting a new quarterback and the players all on the same page. I don't think it's necessarily the players.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if, for instance, there was a scenario where you trade Anthony Miller and a mid-round draft pick for T.Y. Hilton, who is not under contract next season, and so therefore it's a rent-a-player deal for the last 2 seasons.
I don't. You know what? I don't. First of all, I don't see the Colts getting rid of him because I know they're not going to give up on the season. That's saying you're giving up on the season, getting rid of your big play wide receiver. But on the second part of that is rent a player. You see rent a player in other sports, you don't see it in the NFL.
Okay. Then the other question is actually, I think we've talked about this one, so I'll skip this one. But another question was posed about when you're playing against the Rams. This was from Ravi. Is do you concentrate on stopping the run first, or do you concentrate on stopping the pass first?
Good question. I think you got to go in and just look at the tendencies of what the Rams do, how Sean McVay calls the game, and go in and I'm not straddling the fence here, but you try to stop the tendencies, and that's how you're going to have success.
Very good. All right.
They have 2 quality receivers and Cooper Kupp. And everybody says the guy's got to be fast. Cooper Kupp's a 4.65 guy. He runs great routes and has great hands, and he's tough. He'll go over the middle. And by the way, when I was with the Giants, we drafted his dad.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
And then lastly, just want to see if any of you guys want to comment on this post from Ariel Colon. Or Colon.
No.
I can't see it.
On the bottom of your screen.
You want to read that, David?
He says, Mr. Cologne or Colon says the Rams are going to eat bear ass.
No.
All right. Well, I'll turn it back over to you, David.
Oh, that's a good place to end right there. All right. So that's today's video podcast. Greg and I will be back on Tuesday late morning, as the Bears do play Monday night in Los Angeles. And Greg, again, I'm predicting a low-scoring, close game. That's what the Bears do play, are close games. I think it'll be low scoring. I think the Rams win the game, but I hope I'm wrong like you are as well.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens, and I hope we have a nice conversation on Tuesday morning.
We always will. All right, that's it for today. We'll be back here on Tuesday. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
See you later.